Here we have Jed Murphy, one of the senior staff members of the North American Soccer Camp coaching team, talking about dribbling.
What we're going to cover now is a little bit on dribbling with the soccer ball. Probably the most difficult individual skill we find to teach children. Some people would even say, can you teach it? It comes from within. However, there's an awful lot we can do to give children the confidence when they've got the ball to think about dribbling past an opponent. It's probably the one skill that excites, perhaps crowds up to 150,000 people to see a guy running down the side of the field or through the middle of the field past the defender to create, hopefully, a scoring chance for his teammates. However, it's not the easiest thing for us to teach children, but we can do certain things that will help us develop this confidence. One of the things we can do is just have children feel comfortable at moving the ball with both feet, and if we want them to all parts of a square that I'm in at the moment. Not without the ball going out of the square, but small touches with both parts of the feet, using the outside of the foot and the inside of the foot. So we can use the outside and the inside to guide it. We can use both feet. We can use the inside of this foot or the outside. So it's there, and we try to use both feet at all times. We can't afford really to have soccer players just playing the game with one foot. We try to develop a little bit of confidence with the child and perhaps make him feel as comfortable as possible with the ball. Let him feel happy with it, give him the confidence, and then when he's out on the soccer field, hopefully use it wisely. One little practice we can do, we can keep the ball moving with both feet, but we can also use the bottom of the foot. And what we say to the child is you have to roll the ball and step, roll and step, roll and step. Just the idea that the foot that we're on has got to be a little bit more movement, and very important to have good balance. So we roll and step, just to try to keep the child, the idea that it doesn't have to stop the ball, and we just got this non-kicking foot on the ball, and with a little bit of movement. We can do that in reverse by going backwards. Little touches on the ball doesn't stop. In there. Trying to keep the ball moving, just to give the child feeling that the ball is in their control and it doesn't have a mind of its own.
You can see that what Jed has covered there really is close control and use of all the surfaces, outside, inside of the foot. And it's important that the children get to use all the surfaces because they feel familiar with the ball then. And you can see the practice we've set up here is a 20 by 20 yard square with 10, 12 children in the square with a ball each. And they're dribbling the ball around, and the coach is controlling it by asking them to use different surfaces.
I think it's important also here to note, Derek, that what we saw on the diagram are lines between the cones, and we see that space. And I'm glad again to see the coaches reinforcing the concept of space with these children, as well as teaching an aspect of the game. Because without that, they're not going to put the two together, nor will they develop.
And further good point is you can see how the coach controls the situation by occasionally having them stop. Here we move on to another key factor, is the children keeping their head up when they're dribbling around. And you can see the coach is walking around and putting his arms up. And what we're trying to get the children to focus to do is to watch the coach as well as moving the ball around.
And notice too, Derek, some of the kids are running faster, some of the kids are walking. They're all doing it at their own speed.
So the major coaching points here: close control, useful surfaces, and keep your head up. We're trying to cover here ball familiarity, and there's various things we can do with the ball, just with the child, to try and emphasise the importance of the touches of the ball.
I think what's important to realize in these sequence of moves put on by one of our staff members is that what you're going to see in the next 20 seconds is a person touching the ball much more than most of our children do in this country in a game. We know that a professional player has the ball for approximately 2 minutes out of 90 minutes. What we find with little kids, it's even less than that, and they play for 10 weeks. So they get to touch the ball for about 20 minutes in a whole given year. And I'm sure, Derek, you realize that that's not going to improve anyone.
Here now, what Roy's doing is he's using the sole of the foot and the inside of the foot just to change direction. And I think an important point to go from this is that a child can go away and just with a little bit of input from the coach can practice all these moves by himself just with a soccer ball.
You're absolutely right, Derek. Growing up in this country with basketball, that's what's made us such good basketball players, by having a ball, a hoop, and we can do it by ourselves. And that's exactly what we're watching here now. And I think it's really interesting to sit back for a second and just watch some of these individual moves that our staff members making.
Here's a diagram showing that how we can actually organise this type of technique work in the coaching session. We've got 4 people around a 20 by 20 square and a cone in the middle, each child having a ball, and one by one or together they'll dribble into the middle and move the ball out. This practice here, we're trying to just work on turning with the ball on the inside of the foot. And once again, I think it's worthwhile just watching and maybe noting down some of the practices and the organisation of it, because this is the type of thing that will give your child confidence with the ball.
I think we should also point out at this time, organizationally, we can see one grid with 4 people, but I'm sure some of our viewers might be saying, what are the rest of the kids doing at this point?
You can see that just come up on the screen there, we've got 4 people working in this area, and what we'd add, 3 more grids of the same size. Therefore, within a very confined area, we've got all the children working together, and they're close so we can watch them, but also the point of dribbling is we need close control in confined areas, and this generates the whole atmosphere of it.
What's he doing here, Derek?
Here you can see the use of the upper body there to throw a feint or a dummy to put off the defender, and he uses the outside of his foot just to drag the ball out. But all these type of practices we can use, as we've said, to just get the child familiar with the ball and feeling confident on the ball. Here we see just a different turn again, using the outside of the foot. And you can see organisationally what we've got now is just one person coming into the middle. Here, you'd probably do a little bit more coaching.
It also helps the other ones to see a picture of what one's doing while they stand about for a few seconds.
When we're coaching our sessions as well, it's very important that we think about the age group of the children, and to give them rests like this will enhance their performance. Here's a slow motion picture once again of the use of the sole of the foot to drag the ball out, and then the use of the inside of the foot to get it out of his feet so he can make his next move. And remember, your children won't get this within one coaching session. This will take certainly a whole season to gradually build them up, so don't expect too much too soon. Organisation again here. Now we've got 2 people working together. Remember, we can work our whole squad, 15, 16 children, by setting out the grids.
What are we pointing out here now, Derek?
We've just got 2 different turns. Once again, they've virtually made them up for themselves. You'll find the children do that. Here the turn, the person coming from the left puts his foot on the ball, drags it with the sole of his foot, and then uses his right foot to dribble off. And as pointed out by Jed earlier on, it's very important in dribbling that you can use both feet.
How successful will 10, 11-year-olds be with this?
It'll take them a while. We've got a clip coming up that will show some children doing it after 2 or 3 sessions. But as we've pointed out, you have to be patient with it. But they enjoy the session, and also it improves their touch on the ball. The first touch on the ball is so important to them.
So the pressure here is really the turning and the movement, and we don't need any defenders yet.
Certainly no, not at this point. What we might ask is, how do we organise that into our coaching session? Here's an example of it. We've got a 20 by 20 yard grid with 4 players with a ball each and a middle cone. Each time they can come in together or one at a time and do various turns by dribbling with the ball.
One might ask that you have 4 people working in this grid. A coach or one of our viewers might say, what are the other kids doing at this point?
Okay, what we do is rebuild that grid and add it on. So we've now got 4 grids, so all the children are working within 30, 40 yards of each other, which makes the organisation of the practice very easy. The coach can see what's going on. Also, what we try and get over to children when they're dribbling is to keep the ball close, and to have this situation when they're all dribbling in together sort of gives them the feeling that they haven't got that much space to play with, which is what they have to do in the game situation. You can see that what we do is break it up occasionally, and now we've got one player dribbling in at a time. It gives the other children a rest, and also what it can do is it brings out that the children can watch this person do it and then copy them, because obviously at the concrete operational thought stage there are going to be lots of differences in performance at this point. What we'd like to move on to now is the introduction of defenders, because in the game situation obviously the players have to dribble against somebody.
The beauty of this tape, Derek, is that you can begin to see, as you'll see in a moment, one of the young lads in the white short there just turn. And obviously he's doing things that the others aren't. And what we're going to see in a few seconds is how we build from one of the kids doing it to all of them getting an opportunity.
There's an excellent use there of the sole of the foot.
A bad touch on the ball means automatic, you've lost possession. If you have close control and you go straight, this is what happens. And the children will bump into each other or get so close that he's actually able to make contact with the ball, and if not gain possession, stop me doing what I want to do. He's really got the advantage. So what I try to do then is, before I actually get to him, is to think about a change of direction. So if I go straight towards him, I might see him coming this way, I might want to go this way and go past him on this side. Alternatively, I can go on the opposite side. However, linked to that, we need to have a change of speed, because if I do the change of direction at the same speed, he's still got the opportunity to stay with me and perhaps steal the ball. So I've got to try and trick him a little bit and go past him with a change of speed. So it's close control as you approach, and then we think about a change of speed and a change of direction. So as you go to your partner here, nice and close, and suddenly go past him on one side or the other. Maybe a little bit difficult for children to get the idea of trying to move the defender, but let's see if we can show now. If I go towards Mark with the ball here, and I pretend to move this way, I can drop my shoulder, put the weight on this foot. Mark has a tendency to come with me. I can push the ball past on the open side. Still remembering not to kick it so far, lose possession, but a change of speed as I run past him to catch up with the ball. Let's see if we can do that, speed it up a little. Ready, Mark? And we try to go past him, and in this situation we probably put a goalkeeper in and finish with a nice effort on goal. Alternatively, we might want to fool him by perhaps using the feet a little bit more. So as we go towards him, I want to step that way and go on this side of him and knock the ball past. Pretending to go one way and push it the other.
Gary, we've just seen a lot of material there presented by Jed Murphy, and as a coach obviously we need to get over the key concepts, the key factors, but in the developmental stage that we're dealing with children, there's so much to give them, which is the best way to give it.
Well, that's one of those $100,000 questions, and I think what we have to focus in on, which I haven't seen too much in this country, is that the stage that we're dealing with now is probably the most difficult stage and the widest span of not only physiological development but cognitive and social emotional development. So what you're looking at, and I was getting a little tired looking at what they were doing, I mean, what you're looking at in this group of children is a 7-year-old versus all the way to 11-year-old. And obviously the 7-year-old children, we got lines, we got change of direction, we got change of pace, and some of these kids are struggling to figure out left and right. Then you go all the way to an 11-year-old who is beginning to really develop the abstract qualities that we're looking for. So anywhere within that span, these points are going to be brought up. And to answer your question more directly, they need to be brought up, but the biggest problem we have are with the adults who work with these kids, because what we have to do is teach them to lower their expectations and to realize that when a child doesn't complete what we want, it's not us with bad instruction, and the child certainly isn't the problem. It's probably where they are in their development, and it will come if we're patient and we don't turn the child off. That's why it's so important to me. Let's go back.
Here we've got a diagram showing a practice we can use to introduce the concept of feinting and dummying. X1 has to get to the cones on the dotted line before X2 gets there. Here we can see a good change of pace and a good change of direction from the first lad. In this example coming up, the lad moves, but look, there's no change of pace there, and he tends to be very static. And here's another very good example of the lad pretending to go one way with the upper body and going the other way. What we need to do, obviously, now is to introduce the ball.
I think it's interesting to point out here, Derek, that these practices are difficult for concrete operational kids, because what you're simply asking them to do is imagine a line between the two of them. I'm imagining things as abstract, and with concrete thinkers, sometimes it's hard to get them to play along, especially when it's two children. They have a tendency to go across that imaginary line.
Sure. There you can see use of the different surfaces, change of direction, change of pace. And coming up is an excellent example of the child doing the same. Watch the change of pace there, and he gets to the cone before the defender does. Now what we introduce is some direction to it. So the two cones behind X2 and X1, that's where the child wants to get to, but he still has the option of going sideways. Here the coach demonstrates it. And now we have an example of the children. It's important that we put it in perspective. Once again, it's not exactly as the coach did it, but we've got to remember that these children are just normal, run-of-the-mill children that are not hand-picked, and they're just picking up the concept of this. Gary, when we cover things like dribbling, many coaches say to me, how structured should my session be, and how much should I leave to the imagination of the child himself? What do you think about that?
That's an extremely important point, because in this country, in this day and age, we see people even structuring things with 3- and 4-year-olds, and I wonder where it's going to stop. What we have to realize is some of the greatest players that ever played this game, Pele, Cruyff, Canalia, Best, I could go on, were people like our American kids who grew up in the streets playing 2-touch, 3-touch, 3-a-side, 4-a-side. So therefore there was lots of time during this stage of development to develop naturally. One might gather from that we should just disband youth soccer, and I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that we have to leave room for their own creativity. We have to lead. But when we make our instruction, like I mentioned in the workshop, in the classroom, that when it's too didactic and it's too structured for our needs and not the child, then the child doesn't have to think. It's all laid out for them. They don't have to do anything other than what they're told. As soon as we start doing that, we're going to lose them, one, in terms of interest, and secondly, they're never going to develop as true athletes. We're going to stifle them.
That sounds great. Here we've got diagram 5, an area 30 yards by 10. We've got 2 defenders, and they have to stay on the line shown there. X1 and X2 have a ball each, and they go one at a time. And their aim is to dribble past the first defender, then regain composure, dribble past the second defender, and if they do that, we can give them 1 or 2 points. Always encouraging them to remember the key factors: change of pace, change of direction, keeping their head up. What we can do is obviously rotate the defenders with the attackers, so we all have a turn at this. Here you can see that the defender is in a crab position because we want the child to feel successful, and they're just taking the ball past them. You may, obviously with the coach doing this, it looks very easy, but when we put 7-year-olds in, it's not quite that easy.
Again, I'm sure what you're trying to do here is not only work on this concept of the game, but obviously build success at the same time.
Now you can see that we've got some success, and now the children, our defenders, are now able to stand up and they can walk. And here's an example of a full defender, and the lad uses all those things: change of pace, change of direction, keeps his head up and close control in order to beat a player. Once again, this lad is pretty well skilled for his age group, so we mustn't expect this of all our children. So now what we want to do is move into a functional practice to make it more game-like for the children and keeps it interesting. Here, just to explain the diagram we've got, X1 begins with a ball. He dribbles down in a restricted area by the cones. He takes on D, the defender, and once he's beaten D, he crosses the ball in for X2, who has a strike at goal. But remember what we're concentrating on in this practice, it's X1 developing the technique into the skill of beating a defender. You can see once again, we begin the practice with a restricted defender because we want the child to get the feeling of beating the player. It's great if we can finish with a shot at goal and score, but that's not our major focus in this practice. Once again, we mustn't get sidetracked by that cross wasn't superb quality, but that'll come with practice. Let's develop on his dribbling technique. We can't do everything at once. What we're trying to do now is make it a little bit more difficult for the attackers. We've got here a 10 by 20 grid, and what we want to do is X1 and X2 combine to get past to the defender. Remember though, we're working here on dribbling. That's what we want to try and get them to do. If they pass, let's not worry about it, but let's try and get them to dribble as best we can. Now we move into the children.
You can see they're beginning to get the idea of what you're talking about, can't you?
Now we develop again, because we still want to keep the children on their toes. Now it's more game realistic, 3 versus 2. A little bit more passing going on, but at least he's attempting to dribble and he beats the player very well. Here what we call this is the England versus United States of America game. What we've progressed to here now is a 1v1 situation. Small goals in a 30 by 20. X2 and X1 start and Y1 and Y2. The coach rolls a ball in and X2 and Y2 go into the grid, through the goals. Here we can see in the practice they're trying to beat each other 1 versus 1 and just play the ball. But remember, we're not doing shooting, it's dribbling. We're concentrating on the player beating his opponent. What we're going to progress onto is a conditioned game now, and you can see in the diagram what we have is a 30 by 40 yard area, a goalkeeper and defenders, and the goalkeeper or defender plays the ball to X, who then takes on his defender, opposite defender. He then crosses the ball and we try and get a shot at goal.
You mentioned the word conditioned game, Derek. I think it might be very useful at this point to stop what we're doing, because we're going to see some people standing about, and I'm sure our viewers already seen that this is not what we profess. How would you explain this?
What we're trying to do is build up here the whole picture for the child, but because they're still only in the concrete operational thought stage, if we just let everybody run about, we wouldn't get anything we were looking for. So you can see we're concentrating on the winger beating his player and crossing the ball. The player's standing at the other end. When the ball ends up this end, the goalkeeper will get it and we'll go the opposite way. So in fact, we're working for about 20 seconds with each group. Here you can see the player uses a great change of direction and a good change of pace to beat his opposition player.
So in other words, it's the coach taking control of the practice to get out of it what they want.
Exactly. Once again, it's a shot at goal that's not scored, but that's not our focus. Here we've just slowed it up again to show another example of the player taking him on.
I think that's an important thing, because you've talked about many times to me personally about when you're coaching one aspect of the game, stay with that one.
And if the lad scores with a goal, then that's excellent.
I'd like to welcome Mick Wesley to help us with the goalkeeping instruction, and perhaps Mick, you can give us some insight to goalkeeping and how it's come along with your own professional development.
Thank you, Gary, and being an ex-goalkeeper, I think that goalkeeping is a very specialist position and deserves very specialist training. I would like to say, however, before we look at some skills which we can teach young goalkeepers, that I'm very wary about labelling soccer players goalkeepers at too an early age. I myself didn't start playing in goal finally until I was 13 years of age. So I think we've concentrated very well on the things that we can teach all soccer players, things about goalkeeping, not just goalkeepers. Shall we have a look at what we've got?
Right.
As we've said, Gary, goalkeeping is very basic at this age level, and mainly the techniques involved just involve catching the ball and distributing it. Now, when we teach goalkeeping, we often, or should always, start with the ready position, and here the goalkeeper is demonstrating that. We see he never crosses his legs. That's always to keep his balance in the middle of his body, and that his hands are spread ready to collect the ball. But the things we have to remember are that hands are always to the ball first, and whenever possible, the body is behind the hands. In this method, the goalkeeper is getting his legs together behind his hands to provide a second barrier, and the ball will roll up his arms into his chest and he'll cradle it into his chest. Another method, probably safer but more difficult to maneuver, is getting one knee down behind the ball, where the hands again are the first thing that move to the ball, but the body is crouched on one knee behind the ball, providing a barrier, and the ball rolls up into his chest, as we see the goalkeeper doing here. Now, young children, as you know, have a problem with this, but the way in which we would start, as in diagram 1 here, is just being 5 yards away from the goalkeeper, rolling the ball straight to him. And in the excerpt you see coming up is a young goalkeeper, and maybe you can identify some of the problems he's having here.
Well, it's like you said earlier, it's putting all the points together, and he's quite eager, he's very anxious to learn, but one of the things that we believe very strongly in is that at the lower range of concrete operational thought, the 7-year-olds, we don't even believe that anyone should be labeled a goalkeeper. As they get older, around the age of 11, they'll start choosing it on their own. So here we should be just teaching the basics as you're doing. I think a perfect point right here, Mick, is the young lad of what I was mentioning earlier gets himself set before he even looks at the ball, which is very typical of little kids.
That's right, and here we see him again. He's got his legs wide open, although his hands are in a nice position. There's no body behind their hands at all. After we teach the ball being along the ground, we move up and have the ball straight at the chest or at the stomach. This is probably the easiest bit to teach with the goalkeepers, but what we have to do is get them to move the body so that the body remains by the hands. What they will try and do is just stretch out with the hands, especially if the ball is to the side of the goalkeeper. And here we see the coach bouncing sideways, okay, to get himself in the correct position. Notice how he doesn't cross his legs at all, so that when his hands touch the ball, his body is absolutely behind the ball as well. And we see the third coaching points we've had there is not to cross the legs when you move, so that you're always ready to change direction at the last possible moment. This is something which is very difficult to teach with the young children. As well as going sideways, we also have to teach the goalkeepers that when the ball is a little bit higher than their chest or stomach, it's far better for them to jump and collect the ball with the hands in front of the chest or stomach than it is just to lift the hands up. Here we see the goalkeeper having an excellent example. He's jumped slightly to the side to get his hands and body completely behind the ball, and there's no way the ball would go in the goal. Here we see a young goalkeeper catching the ball when it comes straight at him, and he's doing quite a good job. He's getting his hands to the ball first and making sure his chest is behind the ball, but it's a different story when we start to move the ball to the side. A good practice to do with goalkeepers to get them moving sideways is, as shown, just for 2 servers to serve the ball at each post about 8 yards apart. And we can see here, all we want the goalkeeper to do is to shuffle backwards and forwards across the goal, collecting the ball and throwing it back to the server. As the ball gets higher and we have to catch the ball higher, it gets a little bit more complex, and we find young goalkeepers have more problems. Here the goalkeeper demonstrates that in this position your thumbs should be together and your hands reach for the ball in front of the body, and the ball is then caught and cradled in the chest. Here again we have the young goalkeeper catching the ball above his head. He gets his thumbs together nicely, but I think you'll notice that he has to start up in that position. Now with even a higher ball, fielding the ball above the head, it's very good to see that this goalkeeper here getting as high as he can, reaching for the ball with his thumbs together and getting his knee well up for protection and to aid his jump. But to expect a young goalkeeper to do this, I think, is very unrealistic, Gary.
Yes, I would agree, Mick, without a shadow of a doubt. It's important for kids to have pictures to shoot for, which is the reason we do it, but to expect them to do it even at age 11 would be difficult.
The next segment we've got is on diving, and this is where the ball is not delivered straight to the goalkeeper, but at the side of the goalkeeper. The big problem we have with children is that they will step and just reach with their hands. Whereas what we need them to do is to move the hands first and then follow with the body or the chest. And a classic example here of a full-length dive. He's got his thumbs together, the ball will be clawed into the chest, but most importantly, he'll move sideways. It's very unlike a baseball dive where you dive forwards or on your backside into the first base. It's completely different. When we start work on diving with goalkeepers, we often start with them in their finishing position.
If you don't do that, they're not going to have any idea of what you're ultimately trying to get to, so I'm glad to see that you're doing it.
We start with them on their backside so that they build up confidence. Confidence in goalkeeping is very, very important. Most of the reasons children won't dive is because they're afraid of getting hurt. And when you're sitting down like this, you can make it big fun, and he just rolls over on his side and claws the ball into his chest. Once he can do that, we then build up to him squatting, and he gets a little bit more spring. Same actions, thumb together, and bring it into his chest. When we start standing with him, his first instinct was to step rather than to dive, and it was completely wrong. And so we have to go back to basics again, and we get him to dive without stepping this time. And he makes a much better effort there. He's grabbed the ball, and he's pulling it into his chest. Obviously, diving is a very complex skill, and we see the senior goalkeeper here making a full-length dive around to push the ball around the post. Again, I wouldn't expect any young goalkeeper to be able to attempt that. Narrowing the angle is a very abstract concept for any goalkeeper to understand, and a lot of young goalkeepers have big problems with it. But here we see the goalkeeper standing on his line and then gradually moving towards the camera, and it's very well illustrated about the amount of goal that's left open. It's reduced significantly as he comes towards the camera. One way to get over the problems of young goalkeepers seeing why they should come out is to use cones, which really do outline where the goalkeeper should stand.
It's very important for us to realize that the child has very little depth perception. They don't understand the space behind them. Plus, in this case, you could use ropes that could actually define the space.
Here we see cones being used to illustrate a bad point. There's too much space on the goalkeeper's near post and not enough space on the far post, so he's in the wrong position there. Narrowing the angle is often followed by having to spread yourself at the oncoming forward's feet. Here we see the practice in a 10-yard grid with one player dribbling at the goalkeeper and the goalkeeper spreading himself and reaching for the ball. The coaching points here are to get your hands to the ball first, your chest behind your hands, and then to cradle the ball into your chest and make yourself as small as possible, obviously for safety reasons. Confidence is a big problem with this. Children obviously don't like throwing themselves at other people's feet, so we start off with them walking, and the idea is to make it as fun as possible, give them a little competition, and we see that they very quickly learn to get down there without any fear whatsoever and don't often have any major injuries as a result of this. The final part of goalkeeping, once you've caught the ball, is to distribute it. Very often this is just an aimless kick up the field, but there are various other ways of getting rid of the ball. As shown here by the goalkeeper, one of them is to roll the ball out. Another more popular method, especially in America, is called the javelin throw. Here the ball is fielded by the goalkeeper and he throws the ball as if it was a javelin, and this type of throw generally goes direct to the player's feet. You'll see the goalkeeper will move off to follow the ball, and goalkeepers should get in this habit because if anything happens to the throw on its way to your own teammate, you're in a position ready to intercept. The final throw, and the more difficult one, is the overarm or bowling throw, much more popular in Europe. This throw allows far greater distances but is much less accurate than the other throws. This would be practiced in a 10 by 20 yard grid with simply two goalkeepers, one at each end of the grid, and they would simply throw the ball to each other and practice catching it at the same time. As we often have with young children, if they're concentrating on one aspect and which they hear they're throwing it, they forget all about having to catch the ball.
That's very typical, again, of putting and linking commands together. And that's we should expect and not get upset with children because they do it.
Here I managed to get him to throw the ball properly by making his shoulders turn as he throws the ball, which is a very difficult concept for children to understand. When kicking the ball, when I was a young goalkeeper, a very good piece of advice was passed on to me. The major fault in young goalkeepers when they kick a ball is that they take their eye off it. So I was always told to turn the label of the soccer ball to me and kick that label, reading it as I kick it. And you can see here we had quite remarkable results with both goalkeepers who struggled before to kick the ball.